shouting into a conference call robot thing on a conference board table. So if you do have any trouble hearing me, please let me know as soon as possible. And I do encourage questions. You know, we're not going to deal with deeply technical stuff today. But I think there, you know, there is specific stuff here, and I want to make sure that it's clear. And if it is not clear to you, please speak up. So thank you so much for coming. I'll tell you a little bit about me first. First of all, I'm managing editor of Digital at Canadian Business. So that means that I am basically in charge of CanadianBusiness.com, and I also am involved with our sister publication ProfitGuide.ca, and I have some involvement as well with our tablet editions and smartphone editions. So we have Next Issue and an iOS app and all kinds of stuff like that. My primary job is not tablet editions. Mostly my job is on the web, and so that's mostly what I'm going to talk about today. I am totally self-taught. This is mostly the function of working at a nonprofit for a long time. I worked at This Magazine, which has a long and storied history, but not much money to it, and that means that I had to learn a lot of stuff myself, and I had to do everything on the cheap. And that means that I do tend to advocate the cheapest option, and I like learning to do things myself because it's often inexpensive. And I am an enthusiast for animated GIFs. There are more of them in this presentation, so just fair warning. Here's what we will cover today. I'm going to stick just to Google Analytics. There are lots of analytics platforms out there. Google is, of course, the free one, and I know it's already installed on lots and lots of websites. There's so much to learn about it. We're not going to go super deep. This is meant to be the basics, but I'm hoping that you'll come away with a good overview of Google Analytics. I want to make sure that you can check and make sure that Google Analytics is actually installed and working on your site, so we'll just go over that very quickly. We'll look at some of the things that Google Analytics can report on, and we'll talk about some of the basic vocabulary of those metrics. I have a few suggestions on metrics that you might like to pay attention to, and some of the scenarios in which you might want one over another. And of course, one of the most important things is where to go to learn more, because, as I say, in 1 hour, we're going to talk about some good stuff, but there is always more of it. As I said, we're going to stick to the basics today, so there are going to be more advanced topics addressed in next week's webinar, and I would totally encourage you to come to that if you like today's. Please type in the chat box or pipe up on the phone if you have any questions. And I implore you to ask the question, like look within yourself and find the question that you feel most sheepish about asking, because that is the one that people probably need answered most. And so I would encourage you to be someone else's hero. Sorry, I'm seeing the this Adobe Connect thing pop up. Is everyone seeing that? Okay, I'm just going to plow ahead.
I am. Graham, I can.
Yes?
Yep.
So everything's working then?
Looks good to me. Teresa says yes. So let's assume that everybody can.
All right.
Thank you.
So the question, of course, is why measure any of this stuff at all? We have spent a long time thinking about how to measure success and readership and all of the things that matter in print. And it's possible with, especially web measurement, to get a lot of numbers. And so the question is which ones to choose and why. The worst answer that I've seen to this is because we can. We can put 4 different analytics platforms on our website and look at all the numbers we can get. That's not a good answer. We can do better than that. So here are the real reasons that I think analytics are important. First, to help us make editorial decisions. What kind of things can we bring to our audiences that are going to be useful to them and that are going to help us be successful from an editorial standpoint? They can help us make operational decisions. So not just what kind of stories are we going to write, but more questions such as, what kind of website should we build? What are the design considerations and technical considerations that need to go into that? Everything that kind of goes into getting a website up on the web, analytics can also help us make more intelligent decisions about that.
Graham, just have a quick question. Is that okay?
Yep.
Will adding more analytics make the site slower?
That's an excellent question. Most of the major analytics platforms that are out there, so Google Analytics, Omniture, Chartbeat, most of them are fairly reliable, and they can be, if used as directed, no, they will generally not slow down your site. The things that slow down websites, honestly, are too many images. That is the number one thing that can speed up your website is using a fewer images. Most of the weight of all pages on the web is pictures. And if you can get one less picture on the page, you will have a much bigger performance boost for your website than any amount of kind of fine tweaking of the code that these large professional organizations put out. So I think you would be okay to put multiple platforms on there. I think more the question is whether that's useful for you as someone who needs to make editorial and business decisions about the site. The big case that we need analytics for is to persuade advertisers that they are spending their money well and that they are spending their money well with us. And in order to do that, we need to show them that we have the right audience and that we have an audience that is big enough to suit their needs. And analytics are some of the ways that we can tell them either, or hopefully both, that we have the right audience and that we have a big audience that we can help them reach. And then, of course, there are many other stakeholders involved. Regardless of where you are in the organization, if you're someone working on the digital side who has a big project that you want to implement, analytics can help you make that case to your publisher. Or, if you are a person working in circulation who wants to redirect some of your promotional spending, then analytics can help you make that case as well. There are many people within the organization who sometimes need to be persuaded, and analytics is not a silver bullet. It's not going to make that case for you, but it can help illustrate the things that you need to get across to all kinds of people who are not advertisers. So here's the good news. Analytics has shown us pretty conclusively what our audience enjoys reading. This is also, in many ways, the bad news. Because for many publishers, what our audience enjoys reading on the web, when we get down into the nitty-gritty of it in the analytics, it's not exactly what we had hoped all the time. For instance, the type of thing that does really well online for all kinds of publishers are things like this, videos of otters playing the keyboard. And once you see the kind of traffic that these kinds of posts can do, this one is from BuzzFeed, it can kind of make you wonder about the audience's taste a bit. But of course, this is a very successful website, and they got that way because they looked at their analytics, they saw what was working, and they decided to do more of it. If you like this video of a bunch of otters, or this picture of a cat, we have 10,000 more cat videos. And that is one of the reasons why BuzzFeed, for instance, is extremely successful today, is because they have made editorial and business decisions based on paying attention to what the analytics mean, in addition to their editorial judgment. There is more good news in the sense that we can track everything. It's not that we didn't know anything about how people read our print magazines, but the level of detail that you can get with these analytics platforms is extremely granular. So you can watch individual users navigate your site in real time with some of these platforms. You can see exactly what they are reading at any given time. You can see for how long they read it. You can see how far down the page they go. You can see which articles do really well and connect with a lot of people, and you can see which ones don't. And of course, that is also the bad news, is that the things that you are going to see from your analytics are not always going to make you feel great. And I think we just need to be aware of this and prepare ourselves emotionally for engaging with the data that we can get out of these platforms. and to take it seriously, not to take it too personally, and not to get too hung up on one individual piece of bad news. One of the ways that I heard someone describe this, and I agree with it, is that when we do this best, it's like paying attention to the climate, not paying attention to the weather. We want to see kind of big, broad changes over time. We don't want to worry about whether it rains on one day or whether it's sunny on a given day. It's about looking at where things are moving over time and taking the long view. So tracking everything is great. It gives us a lot of insights, and it can also allow you to drill down really deep and discover really interesting things that can help you editorially and in your business. But you just have to know that there are a lot of numbers thrown off by these applications. They can produce all kinds of things. It can be totally bewildering, and I would just recommend that you keep that in mind as we go forward. Here's one of the pieces of news that someone didn't necessarily want to hear. This is Philip Crawley, the publisher of the Globe and Mail. He was talking at a conference in London last year when he kind of let this slip, which is that 40% of the content produced by the Globe and Mail is read by less than 1,000 people. So 40% of everything on the globeandmail.com has page views in the triple digits. And this is a major media corporation in Canada, and this is kind of like that old advertiser's cliche about, I know half of my dollars are wasted, I just don't know which half. Well, we do know which half, unfortunately in this case, or we don't know, but the Globe and Mail knows. And they can see that there is about 40% of the things that they are doing that is essentially not meaningfully connecting with the audience that they want. And so that's the kind of thing that can be hard to hear. And but knowing that truth is better than not knowing it, because if you don't know it, you can't fix it. So that's a lot of bad news to start with. I apologize. This is animated GIF number 2. However, there's light at the end of the tunnel here, and this is a saying that I've been saying a lot to everyone who will listen, and I try to repeat it as often as possible about this, which is that metrics are for doing, not for staring. And this saying comes from a guy named Stijn de Brouwer, who is a developer who has worked at the Toe Center for Journalism at Columbia University. He worked on the Guardian.com redesign and a number of other very important projects. And he's written a lot about what it means to take analytics seriously from a business point of view and from an editorial point of view. And what he's warning against is the kind of hypnosis that can come over you when you look at analytics. And this is very true in Google Analytics and every other platform, is that they all come with these nice little charts and graphs, and the little fever chart ticks up and you feel good, and the little fever chart ticks down and you feel bad. And that is not useful to you as a person who needs to make choices about your business and your magazine. So what he's talking about is that you need to use analytics as a tool to answer questions. And it can't necessarily pose questions, only you can do that, but analytics can help you find partial answers to those questions. So we'll come back to this in a second. I heard a chime. Is someone?
Yeah, I don't know. Let's keep going.
Okay.
If anything changes. Hopefully our participants can still hear us. Yes.
Okay. So let's just quickly go over a couple of the key terms, and then I'm going to show you a live example of Google Analytics and some of the things that I think you will want to look at. So this is just kind of the vocabulary section. Users are the users are the people formerly known as people. Our readers are anyone who comes to the site, and a user is one person using one device. So in Google Analytics, it measures users, not people, not devices, not any of that. It's a user is one person on one laptop, say, or one mobile phone. A session is everything a person does on your site in a given period of time. So a user may have many page views, and a user may have several sessions during the course of a day. So the example is that someone visits your site in the morning and they visit in the afternoon. That's 2 sessions, but 1 user. Google Analytics used to call these people visitors, but now we've switched to visitors and visits, and now it's users and sessions. And this has to do partly with the way Google Analytics tracks, and it's because they also want to encourage people to use their code in apps, and we're not going to get into that today, but users have sessions, and sessions contain other things, such as page views. In Google Analytics, a session is a 30-minute window. So anything that a person does in one chunk of 30 minutes counts as 1 session. So if they open your site, look at one thing, close your site, and come back 25 minutes later, open it again, that still counts as 1 session. Essentially, Google is saying that they're going to treat a person spending time with you as kind of one unit of time. And lots of things can happen during that unit of time, and maybe they're doing other things as well. But as kind of a unit of measurement, a session is just a 30-minute window for one person. And yeah, this is a change in the nomenclature since a couple years ago, is that these are no longer referred to as visits, although you do still see the term visits used in some places in Google Analytics. Don't be confused, sessions and visits are essentially interchangeable. A page view, this is the big one that everyone kind of worries about, right? Is one load of one page on your site. And so users sometimes look at many pages on a site, and that means that you can have a user who has several sessions, and each session has several page views. Page views mostly matter at the moment because for many advertisers, that's what they are looking for, is they want to see how many page views does the site get in one day or 1 month. More page views means more times that their ad has been seen on that page, and therefore more chances that they had to sell, and that's kind of the metric on which we sell a lot of advertising on the web. That's not true across the board, but it is certainly true in general that the page view is still kind of the coin of the realm in terms of how you measure the value of an advertisement to an advertiser on your site and how you sell it. So in this example, if someone visits your site and reads 3 articles, that's 1 user with 1 session, but 3 page views. Bounce. So bounce is essentially a term that I think Google mostly coined, at least popularized, and that means a user session with just 1 page view. These are people who visit your site, maybe they look at 1 article, and then they leave. They close the tab, or they navigate away, or whatever. And the reason, the etymology of the word is pretty clear, that they hit the site and they bounce off it again. And high numbers of bounces, everyone that I've ever talked to kind of worries about a bounce rate, meaning out of all the people who visit the site, how many of them end up leaving without doing anything of value to you as a publisher. So that could be either spending a lot of time on the page so that your advertisers are happy, or clicking on another page so it's a chance to try and sell them a subscription. Any of the things that we associate with kind of a high value reader, bounces are essentially the opposite. They don't spend a lot of time on the site, you don't really have a chance to monetize them, and they're not very loyal. And so if your bounce rate is high, it can be a cause for concern. However, it's not quite as simple as it used to be, I think. Every site is struggling with this, and there are 2 main reasons for this. And it's one of the reasons why I tell people not to get too down in the dumps about bounce rate is because the two factors are search and social. And Google means that lots of people search for an individual piece of information, and if they find it on your site, they click that link and they go to the site and they get what they wanted, and then they leave. And the other reason is because we spend, the most successful publications are now doing a lot of referrals to their websites through social media, so things like Twitter and Facebook. Those tend to be visits that would qualify as bounces, even though those people may follow you on Twitter, follow you on Facebook, come back again and again. Social media encourages bounces because it says, hey, here's something that you want to read it right now, gives you a link, and tends to disaggregate a site for people. It's not the same experience as going to a homepage, seeing a list of articles, and then picking one to spend some time with. So I would say, in both cases, someone who comes via search or someone who comes via social, they may be a perfectly happy and loyal customer, even though they appear to be bounces. So, this is one of those things where it's possible that this is a serious problem, and you want to monitor this and make sure that it's not affecting your business. But at the same time, I would urge calm. There are three main sections of Google Analytics, and I will show those to you in just a moment. So the first one is audience, essentially who visits your site. The second is acquisition, and that is essentially, it will tell you how people found your site. So did they come via search? Did they come via a social media link? Did they come from a link from another site, say? And then behavior. So once they get to your site, how do they behave? What do they do? And what are they spending the most time with and getting the most value from? So it is demo time. I'm in a browser window right here, and this is, I hope everyone can see my mouse.
Yeah.
This is a live Google Analytics session, and I am looking at the stats for this.org. So this is my former employer, This Magazine, and they've given me permission to show all of this to you. So naturally, there's an element of trade secrecy here, and they've been very gracious in being open about this. So please don't share it around. But this is what you see when you log into Google Analytics most of the time, is it will show you a list of the various properties that your organization has. And you'll see This Magazine is kind of an entity that can have more than one website underneath it. So in this case, we also have one of these, which I've hidden for the moment, for shop.this.org, which is the online store. And what that means is that This Magazine is, as an organization, can track two different websites through one account. And this is a fairly useful thing to be able to do, because it allows you to mix and match some information and segment things in different ways depending on what you need to get out of them. That's kind of the advanced class. It is possible, and I think it's something that more organizations could probably look into and learn from. So the two tabs that we're going to spend time on today are reporting here, and I'll show you the admin tab because it's important in terms of turning some features on and off, and making sure that you have the most up-to-date Google Analytics code snippet on your site. Let's go to reporting first.
You may have I may have this question in the future, but can you track various web pages on your site separately?
Yes, you can. Yeah, we'll get into content because you can actually see individually what are the most popular pages on the site, and you can get fairly granular with that.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So this is kind of the dashboard. This is the main page that everyone lands on when they get into Google Analytics. And as you can see, here we have this nice graph. It goes up and down. It goes up during the week and goes down on the weekends. That's a very standard kind of behavior to see with websites. And then it gives you these kind of big top-line numbers. These are so how many sessions and how many users have been on the site. Up here in the top right, you'll see that you can choose a time frame for that, and it gives you a couple of different options for how you can slice and dice that. If you only want to look at the data for the last month, so we can look at only October 2014, you can select that. You can then apply that, and this then switches so that everything we're looking at on this page reflects data only for October 1st through October 31st. And again, you can see by individual days, you can see exactly how many sessions happened on a site. Users, if you click on any of these, you'll see that it changes the graph showing up here and page views. So these are all of the ones that we just talked about: users, sessions, page views, and bounce rate. And you'll see a bounce rate of around 80%. I mean, I would say that's getting on the high side and perhaps on the concerning side. On the other hand, I know that this does fairly well in terms of search ranking for a bunch of quite popular articles, and people often come to the site and read those individual articles, even if they aren't necessarily kind of devoted readers necessarily, and which is, I guess, a nice problem to have, but it would be nice to get that bounce rate down, and we'll talk about some of the ways that might be possible. So here are the three sections that I just talked to you about: audience, acquisition, and behavior. So who, how they got to your site, and what they're doing once they get there. So this page, audience overview, that is this exact page, this kind of dashboard page. It's the one that you're most likely always going to land on. And if you open up this audience tab, you'll see you can hide things and show them again. There are a couple of things that are of interest here. I mean, there are many other things going on, but I'll show you two that I am interested in. One is under technology. This will show you, when you click it, it will show you which browsers people are using when they come to your site, which may not seem immediately useful, but when you are developing a website and you need to decide, how far back in terms of, people having old browsers is often a problem for a developer, is that it takes a lot of time if you are using, say, Internet Explorer 6, it's an old browser, it has a lot of incompatibilities, and it takes a lot of time to kind of tweak a site to make sure that it still behaves properly in Internet Explorer 6. And what this can show you is exactly how many people, if you see, you click on the individual web browser, that it'll show you, in fact, how many people are using which version of that browser. And in this case, what it tells us is that, Internet Explorer 6, which is very difficult to develop for, only one person has actually used it and come to the site in the last month. And for that reason, I would make the business case to my publisher and to our web developers that we would not need to support all of that stuff, and we could therefore cut out all of that trouble from the development process, and in the process cut down on cost and cut down on time. And so knowing that kind of technological information about how are people getting to your site, and what browsers are they seeing the site in, you can then make good choices about your development costs and how you spend your time in setting up a site. The other important one is mobile, is that this will tell you, hello? I heard a chime?
Yep, I think the chime we just ignore, Graham.
Okay. So this will show you the breakdown of who comes to your site on desktop, who comes to your site on mobile, so that means a smartphone most of the time, and who comes on tablet. And over here, you can see you can slice and dice with these buttons. You can change this a number of different ways, and it'll show you exactly the breakdown of how many people come to your site on a smartphone. And again, this is something that a lot of publishers are running into, is that they need to justify how much effort and how much expense they are going to put into optimizing their site for a mobile audience. And lots of publishers are seeing that 30, 40, 50% of their visitors are coming on smartphones and tablets. And that's important information to have. And if that's true for you, then you need to be able to meet those people's needs. And you could probably justify that expense. If not, then a desktop website is kind of good enough for now, and maybe that responsive site or that mobile optimized site is one that you can put off for 6 months or a year without alienating a large portion of your audience. So this is what I mean about not just kind of looking at the graph and being happy whether the graph goes up or down, but trying to use this information to inform choices that you have to make in your business. Acquisition will show you where people, how people got to your site, and all referrals shows you the other websites that link to yours. So you can see that a lot of people are getting to the site through Facebook. Apparently some are getting there through nudistworld3.tumblr.com, even Wikipedia. And it will actually break this down into channels for you. So it'll show you how much of your site comes, and let's switch this to pageview, the same way that we did with the mobile. It'll show you how much came through organic search. So you can see this magazine does very well with organic search, is that a lot of its traffic comes from Google, which means that it's doing well in terms of its search engine optimization. It'll also tell you how many people typed this.org into their browser bar, and for many publishers, this slice of the pie is getting lower and lower all the time. People are coming to sites via many other ways, and referral is a really important one. So having other sites linked to you is, of course, very important, and you want to see that number holding steady. And then social, this channel is also one that's getting bigger all the time for lots of publishers. And in this case, it's not necessarily huge, but 10%, that's not bad. And that may inform the amount of time that you spend promoting through social media. Do you want to get that slice of the pie bigger? Maybe you do. Maybe you've decided that the time and effort that it would take to grow your social media presence isn't actually worth it for your business, and you could cut out some of that time and expense.
Graham, what would clicks from an e-newsletter appear as? Would that appear as direct?
Usually that appears under other, and this is actually something that Google Analytics has been somewhat inconsistent about. So I would say e-newsletter traffic usually will show up under other, and it depends on the provider of the e-newsletter service that you use. Most of them say, Constant Contact or Salesforce or MailChimp. Those usually provide good analytics on their own, and I would say Google has not actually been great about figuring out email traffic and email referrals, and it's probably best to go straight to your email service provider for that kind of information about how many people successfully got and opened their email, and how many clicked through to the site. Those providers provide all of that data, and they do it in a way that is quite user-friendly. So I would say you're probably better off going with it that way.
Good, thank you.
Okay. And lastly, behavior. And this will show you, essentially, on the site, what is the most important, or what is the most successful stuff. So when people come to the site, what are they mostly looking at? And in this case, you can see it gives you a list, and it gives it to you by URL, and you can actually get it to change to page title. So it'll show you the URL by default, and if you click page title, it will give you the actual title of the page. here, so it's a little more readable that way sometimes. And so here is the top 10 list of the top 10 most popular pages on the site, and the home page is number 1, so I guess that's good. And down here in the lower right, you'll see that there's a button to click over to the next 10, and it will show you 11 through 20, and then again, and it goes on for literally hundreds of pages that you could go through and see exactly how many pages on the site got how many hits. And you'll see, this being Google, it wouldn't be Google without a search bar, is that you can search for individual pages. So if I want to know how well, say, the internship page is doing, or how well any of them are, you can type internships and search, and here's the internships page. And you could do that for essentially any page title or any topic in the site, and this will start to give you information about that. So let's try, say, oil. Right, and here are all the pages that have that are somehow related to oil. Usually they have oil in the title, and you can see how they perform.
Graham, I have 2 questions.
Yes.
Nikki asks, and maybe you could repeat my question because some of the listeners have said that my voice sounds muffled.
Okay.
So Nikki asks, I've looked at page view and page title, and they appear to be different pages. What would that be?
That is a good question. I'm afraid I don't know. I've never actually seen that myself in person, so I think that may be to do with the configuration of your particular site. But without knowing more about the situation, I'm afraid I don't know.
Okay,
sorry.
Now let's move on to Liz's question. What's the difference between your home page appearing here and the home page followed by /index?
In most cases, those are essentially identical. Web pages treat this slash, and so if it says slash, that kind of implies index. Index pages are just the default thing that will be displayed if someone looks at a page that ends in the slash. So in most browsers don't actually show that index.html or index.php. Those are the things that just show up by default when they're looking at the site. In your site, those are very likely to be identical. So if you're seeing them differently, that may indicate something with how your site is configured. So maybe a page on your site is linking instead of to the, let's say, I'm just opening up a new thing here. If something on your site is linking to this .org, right? But if they, in typing the link somewhere else on the site, they've put in index.php, you'll see, oh, it's going to show up. Right, so you'll see in this case, when I typed this.org/index.php, it ended up just going to this.org/. But it's possible that Google Analytics then sees that as being one page view with essentially a different name. But it should not be a problem. I think it only if you're seeing it in huge numbers and they seem not at all related in any way, that might be an issue. If you see a couple that are referring to index pages, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Good, thanks.
Okay. All right, back to it. And the thing that I want to show you in behavior that I think is really useful and that we don't necessarily use as much as we might is the behavior flow section. And I think there's a lot to learn from Google Analytics on this page, because what it shows you is landing pages. So that's the first page that someone sees on your site. And if they came through social media, then they linked to probably an individual article page. If they came through search, it's probably the same. Whereas if they typed in this.org into the browser bar and landed on the home page, you can see then, you can actually follow them from that first page and see where they went next and how many of them dropped off. And this is really important information, right? If you have so if we hover over it here, out of about 1,500 sessions, so 1,500 times that people looked at the homepage, only about 30% of that time did they click an article and then go to another page. And what that indicates to me is that we have some work to do in terms of improving the way that the site entices you to click on an article. Is that it could imply all sorts of things, such as does the headline writing style work online? Like, are you actually enticing people to read your stuff? Are you choosing good headlines that work on the web and that draw people's interest and therefore their clicks? It could have to do with design choices about, for instance, this magazine's website is currently not responsive. It's not optimized for mobile sites. So a lot of people who visit on their smartphones, maybe they're just closing the window because they get to it, it doesn't look right on their phone, and they're just saying, nope, I'm leaving. And that is a real problem. So I want to kind of look at those drop-offs and then see, after, the ones who stay, where do they go? And so they wind up on the About page. This is very popular. Somehow they're winding up on a date archive, something from, they're looking at all of the blog posts from October 2014. And of those, most of them don't actually click on a blog post. So they're seeing a list of blog posts, but they're not clicking on the articles. And so I think then you start to glean insights about what is actually working on your site. And then from there, you can start to make changes and measure how well they are actually persuading people to stay with you and be your customers. So those are the three major areas. There is obviously so much more. There are lots and lots of options in here. And I'll just show you the admin panel before we go back to it. Yep.
Before you move on to the admin panel, there was a follow-up question that Liz had to the previous question. And her follow-up question is, if someone were to then ask you how many page views of our home page, how do you combine those stats here?
Sure.
Thank you.
So that would be, so we want to know, sorry, I'm looking. Okay, so site content falls under behavior, and all pages are listed there. So we can get a list. So you'll see the time segment that we're looking at here. So you need to do a couple of things in order to, if someone says, I want to know how many page views did the home page get in October 2014. So first of all, you need to make sure that that is the time frame that is set up here. And you can choose that by going to last month. And note that you can also, customize that by saying, let's get it for the last quarter. So we will go to August, and that'll give us 3 months. So apply that. Right, and now you've got kind of a longer view. This is the quarterly overview of how the site is done. And so now you can see it's changed the order. This article did very well, probably somewhere in here. It's probably that spike. And the homepage has dropped to number 2. So it's the number 2 most popular site on there. And for that time period, you can see there's 6,195 page views. Now, this column, unique page views, means essentially a session that included only that page view. Like if someone, it's quite common when someone visits a site that say they hit the page, they go to the home page, so that's one page view for the home page. Then they click an article, so they read that, that's a second page view. And then they go back to the home page and click a second article. And so what you have is you have three unique page views, but 4 page views overall. Is that the second time that they saw the home page, that's not a unique page view. It's one session in which they saw the same page twice. And so that's what this column refers to. I don't know a lot of people who do much with this number, although it's certainly one that you might be interested in. And so just the rest of this table, so it'll show you how much time did they spend on the page, so about 2 minutes. To me, that indicates that maybe that's not great. If someone is spending 2 minutes looking at the home page, maybe they need to we need to give them better suggestions faster so that they can find something they want to read. I think probably you want to have people on the home page for less time and have them spend more time on article pages. And you can see that this one performed very well, 4.5 minutes. So people really dug into that thing. They read it for a long time. They spent time with it, and it did really well in terms of the page views that it got. But you see, it's got a high bounce rate. So this means that it did well on social, and lots of people passed it around, and they sent it to their friends, and those friends clicked, and they read, but then they closed the tab. So, when this is part of the kind of questions for how, the question that we're always asking ourselves to try and get more success out of our sites is how can we keep people around longer? And it means looking at how you're building those pages. Are you suggesting other articles that people might like to read? So you enjoyed this one? Let's give you 10 more. That's exactly what BuzzFeed has done with, those otters playing the keyboard, is that you like an otter playing a keyboard, well, here's a panda playing a keyboard, and here's, a rabbit. And if you've got people on the site, that is your opportunity to keep them around. And so think about how, the most popular content is not only doing well on its own terms, but how it's working to keep people in your website and in your experience for longer. Okay, I just want to quickly show you admin, and then we'll go back and finish up here. You'll see this tab up here is where you actually manage things. So you set such things as the account setting. There are lots of settings in here. I think the most important one, though, is tracking info. So this will show you your tracking code. This is the actual code that has to go onto your site in order to start measuring things properly. And so you can look for this by viewing the code on your site, and if it's there, you are set up and ready to go. And then user management. This is for keeping track of who can access this. So you can actually give the ability to see all your analytics to other people, and they can then, so you see here, you can add their email. They can then log in and see all of this stuff. Some of them are able to add other people. Some of them are only able to see things but not edit them. And this can be important if you need, say, you have an ad salesperson who needs to be aware of what's going on the site, but they're not going to get technical, and they don't need to be able to share it with other people. That's the kind of thing that user management comes in handy for. So I would encourage you to make use of that. And you'll see there are essentially 3 columns here. This magazine, so this is the overall kind of organizational settings. And then in this second column, you have the properties for individual properties under that organization. So as I said, this has its main website where it publishes content, and then it has the online shop where it sells subscriptions. And so it's one organization with 2 websites going on into there. And then in this third column, this is definitely advanced class stuff. There are ways to kind of slice and dice individual views of data from any of these properties in all kinds of different ways. And that has to do way more with kind of conversion tracking and lots, there's e-commerce and all kinds of other things that can be done to drill deeper in here. That's outside the purview of today. Okay, so some of these features that I've talked about are only available with the latest version of Google Analytics, and so what you want to do is check your site. So go to the website that you're curious about and open up View Source. You can do that in any web browser. It's usually under Edit or something like that, and look for the Google Analytics code. And there's 3 versions of this that have existed over time. There's a really old one, and you definitely need to upgrade this. If you see this on your site, please upgrade, because this doesn't offer some of the most up-to-date functionality. Here's another little script tag, and this is the one that is probably on lots of people's sites. It would not be unusual for you to have this on your website, and it's perfectly fine. But I think going ahead, you want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date code, and that's what I just showed you in the in this page is the tracking info and the tracking code. This is the most up-to-date version, and you just want to make sure that that is what you have in your page, and that means that it'll allow you to kind of take advantage of new features that are added to Google Analytics over time. Luckily, you don't have to do this yourself most of the time. There are plugins available for most of the major content management systems that will look after this for you. So for WordPress, for Drupal, for Joomla, all of these are links, and they will take you to the plugins in question. And they do a perfectly good job of implementing this, and it means that you don't have to get your hands dirty with the actual code. What you do need to know is is this number, and it's the Google Analytics tracking ID number. And again, that's what this is right here. Is that number is the one that you need, and if you have that, any of those plugins will work for you. I would say beware vanity metrics, i.e. numbers that make us feel good but don't help us make decisions. I would strongly encourage you to have questions in mind when you're looking at analytics, and don't just say, okay, number of page views went up this month versus last month. Everything's fine. I think that is not especially helpful. What we need to be able to do is to make changes to solve problems and identify opportunities for us as publications and as businesses. Such as, if you want to increase page views because you've got advertisers looking for that, the question is, how are you going to focus that efforts? Like, are people actually reading the things that you are putting on your site? And are they finding it the right ways? Could you focus your efforts better on social media or on search optimization or on your style of headline writing? All of those things could conceivably improve your page views. The question you need to ask your analytics is, which of those dials are you going to turn? Because you only have so much time in a given day. I want to increase reader loyalty. Could you implement an email newsletter? Are you choosing the right things to put on your homepage? It could be something as simple as people find your comment section to be kind of spammy or uncivil, and maybe that's the thing that you could do better that would keep people hanging around your site longer. All of these are possibilities, and the analytics are not going to say, here's the thing you need to fix, but the analytics can suggest to you when the things that you are experimenting with are working versus when they're not working. And then it's as simple as, I want to sell more subscriptions. So what is the sales language what sales language works for you? And if you have a green subscribe button, does it work better than a red one? And that's something that you could definitely test in analytics by trying it one way for 1 month, change it and try it the other way the next month. And again, Google is not going to say you should make your button green, but it will tell you that when you tried a green button, you got more page views, you had more people hitting the subscribe page, and when they got there, they stayed longer, and maybe some of them became subscribers. And that's a question that we're all asking as we consider paywalls and other kind of monetization efforts that we need to think about. The analytics can suggest solutions to you if you ask the right questions. So my point, hectoring you about this, is just that chart slopes up is not enough. You have to think about this scientifically. Form a hypothesis, make a change, and observe the results. And I think if you're not doing that, you are a cat staring at a screen, and that is not going to help you put out a better magazine. It's not going to help you win more readers. It's not going to help you do more business, sell more ads, sell more subscriptions, do any of that stuff. So don't worry about so much chart ticks up, chart ticks down. See how things are working on your site using analytics, and then make meaningful changes based on that. There are links here to learn more about any of these things, and you'll see Stain de Bruera. I've linked to a couple of his blog posts about this, and each of these I think are great reading. I would very much encourage you to read them. Google Analytics runs an academy, so they actually have a complete e-learning platform on there that will tell you a lot and go into a lot of detail about all of these items. They also have a YouTube channel where they show kind of quick hits of tips and things about how to do better in Google Analytics. And that is it. And I've taken up essentially all the time here, leaving very little for questions. So I apologize for that. We do have a couple minutes, I think, Heather.
Yeah, do you have time for a couple of questions, Graham?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to stick around. And this presentation that I've given is itself a website, and you can find it here at this link. And feel free to go there. Hit me up on Twitter as well if you have any questions. I love talking about this stuff, and yeah.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to launch right into them. Is there a way we can combine total stats for the main pages, and the example is homepage, alternate address for homepage, the about, etc.?
Yep, so let's look at reporting again. So I think if I'm understanding properly, that you want to essentially have like a bucket of pages that you want to look at together.
Well, that would be my guess. The question is coming from a participant, so. Okay,
so the great thing about this is that looking at it in Google Analytics is useful, and it can tell you things. One of the things that is even better is that it will it allows you to download all of this data in an Excel spreadsheet so that you can slice and dice it any way you want. As far as I know, there is no way to kind of automatically group things together other than kind of downloading the data and isolating those on your own. I think it's just out of the purview of Google Analytics to kind of keep track of how you want to make those buckets, but you can get everything at once and then isolate things as you need them. I think that's probably as good as we're going to do. So if you wanted to know just the About page and the Home page, I would download this and start adding things that way.
Excellent. Are we going to cover filters next week?
Yes. So that's filters are these things up here. You can add segments and do all kinds of things up there. I would encourage you to play around with it. But yeah, that's something that we'll talk about more next week.
That's great. One of our participants says she'll be back next week, and she was just wondering how to set up filters to filter out internal traffic. But if we went over that next week, that would be great.
I will add that to the agenda.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions, but I am getting a lot of thank yous and saying that this was terrific. So thank you very much, Graham.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for sticking around for an hour. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope to see you next week. And I wish you all the success with your web futures and presence.
Thank you very much, Graham.
All right.
Okay, we'll see you next week.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.